All right, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. My name is Cyndi Raskin. I'm the Director of Commuter Services for TBARTA, Commute Tampa Bay, here in the Florida Department of Transportation, District 7. We have some great speakers for you today. We've got industry experts, Elham Shirazi, and filling in for Drew today is Bernie O'Donnell. They're going to be sharing some nuggets of wisdom for you. As we get started here, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. First, huge thanks to Phil Winters and Christina Epps at Cutter. They have volunteered the Adobe Connect platform for us to have these series of 3 webinars on. We really appreciate their support and their expertise in this. Please do keep your microphone muted. I'm not sure if we have the option for you to even be unmuted available here. But if you could, please use the Q&A box at the bottom if you have any questions. If it's a specific question for Elham or Bernie, just put their name in there too, and we'll address those at the end of the session. We are recording, as we mentioned at the beginning, and we'll have those sessions available on our 3 presenting sponsors' websites next week. The webinar you're seeing today and the other 2 in the series are co-sponsored by TBARTA Commute Tampa Bay, which is Florida Department of Transportation District 7, Rethink Your Commute, which is District 5, and Commute Connector, which is District 1. So we have a pretty good chunk of the state of Florida covered here, and hopefully we'll have lots of people join us as we move on. Just to give you a little bit of background about commuter assistance programs, if you're not familiar with them. The Commuter Assistance Program is funded by the Florida Department of Transportation, and it's provided by different companies depending on where you're located. So the partners I mentioned were all listed down there on the bottom, and in all cases, the programs offer free employer consulting services to help you identify, set up, and implement, maintain effective commute alternative programs for your employees. We work directly with employers and directly with commuters to work on all of these things you see listed here: carpool, vanpool, bicycle, public transit, etc. Right now, of course, we're all working from home. So this series of webinars seemed very timely for us to put on for you. So here we are. Just a little bit about Commute Tampa Bay. We are, as I said, in the Tampa Bay area. We cover Pinellas, Pasco, Hillsborough, Hernando, and Citrus counties. Sorry, I got lost there for a second in my thought. This is my team. I'm there in the middle, and I got Brandon, Terry, Sue, and Keisha. We're all here to help you. So please feel free to visit our website, give us a call. Anything we can do to help you in the Tampa Bay area, put together a program for your team would be awesome. As I mentioned, here are our presenters today: Elham Shirazi. She's the principal of e-planning with over 30 years of experience in developing telework and flexible scheduling programs. She's recognized as a leader in this field. She's developed resource materials, conducted training workshops, evaluated the impact of telework on employees and flexible scheduling, regional telework resources, and she has helped with programs all around the country, really: California, Florida, Georgia, Washington, D.C., Colorado, Texas, a large portion of the country. Drew was supposed to be with us today presenting, but he's been able to make it, so Bertie's going to take the whole technology section for us. He has an extensive background in many aspects of IT and telecommunications from his experience with partner consulting, the U.S. Air Force, state government, private sector businesses. His expertise includes tactical and strategic perspectives through his IT telecom work, serving positions, employing hands-on technical skills, managerial, project management, strategy guidance, etc. He's a past president and vice member of the National Association of State Technology Directors, so he's certainly an expert in the field. With that, I am going to...
Thank you so much, Cyndi, and good afternoon. I guess we're starting week 4 or 5 for some of you of teleworking, and it looks like from the comments that some of you have settled into a pattern. This webinar is really directed at trying to establish some good habits for managers, employers in adopting teleworking during this time. Typically, organizations consider teleworking because of one of the following reasons. A lot of times it's to improve productivity, and it's typically in the range of 10 to 20%. As you've realized, for some of you, there are less distractions at home, although right now we are all experiencing a very different challenge, which is that everybody's home. So that's one of the reasons employers implement. Another one is to improve coverage across time zones, or if some people are starting earlier, some people are starting later, you can definitely stretch out the workday. Obviously, sustainability is key. A lot of us have seen the impact of teleworking on our cities and urban areas as the dust of pollution has really gone away and we have beautiful blue skies. Employers also find that teleworking improves morale, it reduces costs for employees. It can also help reduce overhead costs for employers. One of the things which may happen post-COVID is some smaller businesses or medium and large businesses may see that they don't need all the square footage that they have and may be able to save a little bit on the overhead and parking costs. We also know that at least up till now, recruitment and retention have been really big elements in the market, and many employers offer teleworking because it provides flexibility, and that's what your millennials and your Generation X and Z are also looking for. Obviously, there's reduced tardiness and absenteeism. You're at home, ready to start, and it is also used to prepare for business continuity. What has happened in today's marketplace is that a lot of this, the reasons for implementation have probably gone a little bit lower on the list because employers have found that teleworking is one of the only ways to maintain business continuity. But what's different about teleworking in the era of COVID-19 is that this is not an ideal setting for teleworking. As I mentioned, typically teleworking has very rigid rules about work not spilling into life and life not spilling into work. However, some of that is out of our control. A lot of you may have started without having the luxury of setting up pilots or, testing teleworking before. Maybe your organization had, a few people who teleworked on occasion, but probably nothing at the scale that we're experiencing. However, this does place us in a very unique position because it enables organizations, individuals, managers to test teleworking and see if there is a place for teleworking in the future of their organization. So this is a great time to learn valuable lessons, but also to make corrections, week by week to make this a much more fluid process. So I think, again, being week 4 or 5 for many of you, you've probably, maybe it's a good reminder, but, we don't want to overreact. We want to be calm and optimistic. Yes, this too shall come to an end. We don't know when, but we might as well make the best of it. We need to be forgiving and understanding, especially those of you who are managers. This is not a typical environment for teleworking, so we do need to, to be flexible. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a great chance to update, change, make improvements in this arrangement. So what is the manager's role in this environment? It's basically creating a work environment that can maximize productivity with the limitations of the technology. And I'm assuming Maybe some of you started with less technology and have been ramping up now. That's what's happened to a lot of organizations. But you also started with, whatever trust there was in the workplace. Trust is a critical element of telework because obviously you're not seeing people, but you are trusting them that they're getting the work done. And however, this is all in the context of all those externalities, such as dealing, with children in the household, young adults, maybe taking care of elders, sick parents, family, and also not having the time to have given much thought to what is an appropriate space for working at home. Basically, some of the rules for managing teleworkers, are not different than managing employees in the office. However, maybe this is a good moment to just pause and think about it. And again, maybe you've already started doing this, but a primary step is to help employees in organizing their work. So as managers, I would really advise that if you haven't done it so far, that you have a beginning of the week meeting with your employees to make sure you're on the same page, define the objectives, define the deliverables, establish the time frames that make sense. Ask the employee to send you an email, basically going over what the goals and deliverables are for the week so that you're both on the same page. I would really suggest that by the end of the week, you review the status and, give feedback, coach employees, and then set them up for the following week. Doing this, on a week-by-week basis really helps develop your employees' strengths for being independent. Your style of managing employees does not change. If you have employees, those of you from the HR field, you know that these are 4 styles of management. Some employees need a lot of direction, and that's not going to change. Some employees need coaching, meaning, you direct them, they need a little bit of, assistance. With some, you're basically advising them, they know what they have to do, and then some employees you just delegate. You say a sentence and they know exactly what to do. So this is not going to change. Your employees are not going to overnight go from being in a directing situation to one where you can delegate to them. So make sure that you manage the process carefully. Here is a task schedule. Again, this is downloadable from this webinar. It's just a very simple sheet where if you want, your employees can use it to identify their tasks, their deliverables, and their accomplishments. As you can see, it's not really onerous, and this can be used on a weekly basis. So it's really important to look at communication standards and think through how will they change. Are you the type of manager who just walks down the hall and talks with your employees, or are you the type of manager who sends a lot of emails? A lot of times in the workplace, I think what we have seen is that people sit next to each other and don't talk. They actually just send emails. Well, I think in this context, it's really important to know that it's okay to interrupt. It's okay to call each other. In fact, encourage your employees to call or send you emails or text when they have questions. And make sure that they're comfortable with the technology that they're using. Something really essential is also to identify employee by employee if there are core hours where they can be available. As we know, typically if you have a telework program, it is never a replacement for child care or dependent care. But in this context, we see families, we see partnerships where they're sharing duties. So somebody has the kids in the morning, the other person has them in the afternoon. So it's really, it would be good for managers and employees to talk about when it's okay to start, when it's okay to end work, but also what are the core hours that you expect people to be available. Accessibility is critical. Make sure that teleworkers do feel accountable for that. Now, sometimes it may take them a little bit of time to get back to you, but, you know, if they're on the phone, if they're busy, you know, engaged otherwise, they can simply send a text. It's good for everybody to have each other's contact numbers, and to also make sure that electronic calendars are updated. So not only do we encourage your employees and all of you to put business meetings on that calendar, but also indicate what is the personal non-available time. So obviously this is a big consideration in this era. Brainstorming is an important part of the workplace. Sometimes it happens over the water cooler, sometimes in the kitchen while you're getting lunch. Make sure that those types of innovations are still going on. And what some employers have done is they do have, you know, virtual breaks for employees to do that. Or if you find yourself in a situation where you're brainstorming with an employee, maybe pause, think about who else should be included, and include those other people also in your conversation. I think a lot of us have seen Zoom and Teams come into play these days and other types of collaborative technologies. Please do keep in mind, FaceTime helps build relationships. It gives a certain level of comfort to both parties. It's good to see each other's, you know, gestures and body language. It also breaks the isolation. So I do highly recommend that as managers, you try to chat with your employees at least once a week by video, but also make sure that, you know, there are other, you know, occasions for getting the team together so they can see each other. There should be clear direction from managers on when electronic presence is required for meetings. So please be very clear when you want all hands on deck. Obviously, you won't be walking into a room where someone's sitting at the head of the room and running the meeting. So you want to make sure that there's a clear agenda with topics, with speakers. Maybe sometimes do a 15-minute team huddle. Working alone for many days in a row can cause depression for some employees, especially those who live alone. So some of that face time really does help alleviate that tension. If your employees are not adequately trained on using collaborative technology, make sure they have tutorials and they have the time to learn those tools. As I mentioned before, you know, conducting short team huddles are great. A lot of organizations have that virtual coffee break. They even have virtual water cooler time, believe it or not. So, and, you know, some employees have started sharing pictures of their pets and recipes and trying to break down the monotony of, you know, being at home by creating some interactions with others at the workplace. Trust is essential, so please, as managers, build that trust so that employees involve you in solving their, you know, issues and problems as they come up. It would be really nice if you could send weekly messages to employees just to improve morale and optimism as a check-in. Employees really appreciate those little touches. You also want to make sure that employees have work-life balance, in that if you see someone working, you know, at odd hours and nonstop, that's not a good sign. You definitely do need to, give them some indications that, work has to stop at some point, and that's when they need to take care of their other, necessities. So what's the future? I think that if your organization is seeing that this, that teleworking is something that could be part of your practice in the future, you need to start planning now. There are some, details that go into developing telework programs, and we also need to manage expectations. So if you don't think that some people are going to be able to telework in the future, be very clear that, this is for this period, and, that when we go back to a new normal, things are going to be different, so people don't take, assume that this is going to, they're going to be able to telework if that's not going to be the situation. I'm hoping that, the technology for everybody is improving. We've seen big changes happen in, in companies that never had a VPN and now have, a lot of the employees can do everything remotely. It's very possible that in the future we'll see more of the ability to telework 1 or 2 days a week, maybe not full-time, but I think if nothing else, this big experiment that the whole globe is going through will show that there is a place for teleworking maybe once or twice a week. Remember, not everybody's going to want to continue. Some people don't like it. And I think what this time also allows people to do is to make some decisions as to whether or not they are a good candidate. The other thing I wanted to share with you is consider alternative work hours in the future. Some programs like working 4 10-hour days or working 80 hours in 9 days might be some, some good solutions for those who cannot work at home. What should you be tracking? I think definitely you want to have an eye on the productivity for different jobs and employees. Make sure that as technology issues arise, that you are not only finding solutions for the individuals, but it's a solution that is widely shared. I think that you also want to, get a handle on where teleworking is working. Get an idea if employees like it, they don't like it, what are some downsides, and all of this will hopefully create a future where working at home becomes a little bit more normal for everybody. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to pass it on to Bernie in a second. So just a few final words. Act on problems as they arise. They're not going to go away. You're not, in the same space as your employees. So if something is not right, talk to them. Have communications, be honest. But there is an adjustment period initially, and that's why we encourage you to have feedback loops and make sure that you're going back and forth with everybody. So Bernie, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Elham. Maybe just to break things up a moment, we'll have a little fun poll here on your screen, and you can take a look at that, and I think everybody can relate to this. I know when my daughters were younger, my wife was preparing a newsletter for their second grade class, and she had the whole newsletter get erased on the computer, and my second grade daughter came up to her and saw her frustration and clicked one button and the whole newsletter reappeared. And my wife said, "How did you do that? What did you do?" And my daughter said, "I pressed the undo button." And my wife said, "There's an undo button?" And it's amazing what our children can show us. So I'm sure some of us have sometimes had to ask our teenagers for some tech support. It's interesting to see the answers come in here. And if anybody, I see some people wish they had a teenager to help them. I wish I still had some teenagers, because when I did, I probably would have been willing to loan them out from time to time, and for no fee at all. But they're all way past those years now, so I can't make that offer. But if you do know somebody with a teenager and you don't have your own, you'll find that some of them may be very willing to loan them out, and they absolutely can be very helpful. Well, there we go. That was enlightening. Well, thank you all for joining today, and thank you, Elham, for your insights. A lot of people seem to think that I've spoken to that the technology part of telework is the difficult part, and I've been a technology person a long time, so to me it's not a big deal. But even from an objective viewpoint, I think the technology part behaves in a fairly logical manner, and some of the aspects of what Elham told us about are much more complicated because they involve people, and then that brings in emotions, that brings in issues and problems and training and so much more. So I really like to think the technology part is easy. We don't have to build the technology. Most of the computers and services that we want to use are available to us, and they're really not all that tough to tackle, and there's usually help right around the corner somewhere to help you out with it. Certainly we're used to an environment where we've had on-premises technology. Our employers have provided our technology. It's standardized among our employees. There's a lot of in-person interaction, meetings, phone calls, emails, maybe some chat and messaging, but not as much of that virtual interaction as we have in a teleworking environment. The business locations with some mobility, but the business locations in our normal work life are generally somewhat fixed, and we stick to our employer's location. Some of us have jobs that are a little different than that, but for the majority of us, we go somewhere and we work at a location owned by the employer. When we move to a virtual environment, as we do now, we're using cloud technology, which is great because we can get at the solutions we need, the software and the tools. They're mostly device agnostic. You can use a Mac, a PC, a phone to get to these services, so that we don't all have to have the same standardized equipment, which is a great thing because a lot of us have had to stand up this mode of operation very quickly. Our work hours can shift, as Elham mentioned. Sometimes that's beneficial. Everybody may not be as available at the same time for that instant availability that you might have in a physical workplace where everybody goes to the same location. And we can use these services pretty much anywhere due to the abundance of connectivity now through cellular or Wi-Fi or high-speed internet. And really moving from an office environment where everything's meetings to moving to where we're dealing with virtual meetings really bring one detriment that I see, and that in the office environment there'd usually be somebody who would bring donuts to the meeting. You don't get that in the virtual environment. At least I haven't had anybody bring me any good snacks for my meetings lately. Some of the technology to support telework, as I mentioned, the cloud-based applications that we use scale up and down very quickly. We can roll them out quickly to a lot of employees. They're relatively low cost. Some even offer free trials. You pay for what you use. You can stop using it and reduce monthly costs. You can get access to your files anywhere. You can use products like Microsoft Teams or Zoom and collaborate and eliminate travel, and even conduct call center type operations with remote agents and single reach phone numbers. And again, using these PC, iPad, phone, whether it's a Mac or PC type computer, to work with most of these solutions. And once you're logged in, you're really part of the group just as much as if you were in your office environment. Some of the common applications we're using, of course, are file sharing, where we can share work products across different software, and most of the software now works very well together. We don't have to convert files or worry about what type of software our peers have. Some of our business software is a little more custom when you get into HR and engineering, educational, financial systems, and they may require different modes of access based on employer policies and security. You may have a dual-factor authentication rather than a simple login where you get a text message back with a code to verify your login to prevent anyone from getting in there who shouldn't be in there. And on the collaboration, we typically end up using more than one tool because we don't always choose the same tool for what works best for us. So I know, in the past week I've used Zoom, I've used Adobe Connect, which we're using here, which is tremendous, Microsoft Teams. These products are fairly easy to use, and you can get up and running quickly on them, which is great. And you're usually going to find that you've got to become a little bit familiar with each of them, but fortunately, it isn't difficult to become familiar with them. For our business software, you know, again, most of this is cloud-based stuff that we can all get to from our homes without having to have any kind of major bandwidth or hardware changes to our systems. You know, Salesforce or financial systems. The file sharing options are out there. And again, there are issues around file sharing regarding policies and security. If you have government information or healthcare information, there could be HIPAA rules or personally identifiable information that needs to be controlled. And your employer probably has rules regarding the custody and the backup of some of these files to make sure that information doesn't get lost due to the lack of the typical automated backups that you might have on your systems at your workplace. Some of the popular collaboration tools some are fairly similar. You look at G Suite and 365. You have mail, you have documents, you have spreadsheets, slides, forms, you know, screen sharing, all those kinds of things. Slack is a little bit different, where your work gets organized in channels, typically aligned around projects. It's kind of a nice way of doing work for certain project-focused work. And as I mentioned, Zoom and things like Microsoft Teams that are part of 365. Cisco WebEx are great for the collaboration. And you may start with one product, but I encourage you to try a few different ones, and you may find that you like some features or something fills some gaps for you. So you need to do a little bit of assessment on your telework and define your requirements to see what works best for your team. You know, what do you really need, and is it necessarily what you have now? You may be doing things now, but there could be improvements in how you work that you could put into place and take advantage of this opportunity to do so. So you assess what you have, test some things with your peers and friends and review them together, share your observations, and identify the gaps and where you need to fill those gaps, perhaps with new products. So as you try new things, don't get too locked into them. You may want to use them long term, but once in a while try something different. And even if you're using a free service, you may want to look at some of the paid services for some of these products and consider the additional features that you get. Sometimes you do get what you pay for, and spending a little bit more money, doesn't have to be a lot, really can get you some nice features that may be worth their weight in gold in terms of making your work easier for you. In terms of your success with the collaboration tools, do get familiar with them. I think a lot of you may have read the news media, seen some of the news about Zoom being an issue and people getting interrupted in some of their Zoom meetings. And almost any tool is susceptible to that. And in a lot of cases, people have gotten the usernames and passwords to get into these meetings. The hosts may not have controlled who has access. They may have not required password access to some of these tools. And because some of these tools are so quick to roll out, you can get up and running with Zoom, 60 seconds from when you first learn about it. You can load it and be up and on a video call. But it takes a few minutes to get familiar with some of the tools and some of the options. And you should take that extra time and test things and get used to them. Start your meetings early as well when you're using these tools. Test your mic and speakers. Be ready, to conduct business right at the beginning of the call. Have people get on the call a couple minutes early, and then you're ready to go and conduct business at the moment the meeting starts. Develop a video culture, and Elham mentioned it builds relationships, and I was never a big video fan, and I had to learn the hard way, and she's absolutely right. It really does. Audio calls may seem like they do the same thing, and they allow you to multitask, and from a selfish perspective, that's fine, but you really shouldn't be multitasking. You should be engaged, and when you use the video tools, you'll find you're more engaged. The meetings are more productive. There's less small talk, and you know, it's great to have the small talk for a couple minutes as the meeting opens, but once you get down to business on a video call, you really will find the calls go quicker, and you really do get that understanding of people's feelings by seeing their facial expressions and how they're reacting to what you're saying. You know, do use a headset, a noise-canceling microphone if you can, to reduce background noise. It doesn't have to be expensive. Some of the solutions are expensive, and if you're going to use it a lot, when you divide the cost of it into the hours of use, you want something that's comfortable, that does the job, that reduces noise, and makes your life easier for these interactions. On video, you know, watch your backlighting. You don't want light from behind your head that makes your face turn into a shadow where people can't pick up those visual cues. And watch the background. You don't want anything confidential there. You don't want things moving around. The camera has a very wide field of view. I was watching the national news the other night, and the reporter, as many of them have been, were reporting from home, and in the background behind her on the wall was a little sliver of sunshine, and there was some motion in it, and you could see what was happening. It was distracting for a couple of minutes. Once you realized what was happening, the sun was coming in the window from behind the camera, shining on the wall behind her, and there was obviously a tree outside the window, and the tree was blowing in the wind, so you had this moving shadow. It was very small, but it was very distracting on the wall. So preview your background when you're doing these video calls, and it will keep people focused on you, because that's who they should be focused on during these calls. So implement solutions that will grow with your company. I had a discussion this morning where there was a hospital who told some of their admin staff and financial staff, you're not coming back. We're already looking at reducing or eliminating leased space where you operate today, and we may be looking at long-term permanently having you work from home. There's no need to have you here in the hospital. We can use some of the space for other things, and we're going to telework from now on. Now the pendulum may swing back a little. There may be some pushback, because there certainly are good reasons to get people together, and there's a balance to be struck. You don't necessarily want 100% telework, but you don't want 100% non-telework either. But when you consider that these solutions can help you in snowstorms, or, well, maybe not in Florida snowstorms, but hurricanes, employees with slight illnesses or recovering from medical procedures and they're not mobile yet, sick children engaged, people engaged in child care. If your work solution is inaccessible due to a flood or a bridge out or a gas leak, plus off-hours access to your workforce and to your work information. So consider this a long-term solution. Look at the procedures and technologies that you're implementing, and those will serve your business continuity strategy in the future. And you'll find that the telework things that you're going through now will be a great pilot program for what you'll want to do with your company long term. And Cyndi, back to you.
Great, thank you so much, Barney and Elham, for those great presentations. We still have about 20 minutes left, so please type your questions in the Q&A box. While you're contemplating those questions, I just want to mention this is the first in a series of 3 webinars. Next week on Friday at noon, Bernie's going to go deeper into some of the technological needs and things that we might need for making teleworking a more longer-term situation. And then on Friday, the 1st of May, also at noon, Elham is going to dig deeper into teleworking and how we make that part of our culture for the future, past the COVID-19 situation. So please make sure you tune in. We have plenty of room, so share the link, registration link with your coworkers and friends, and as many people as we can have join us would be great. I do have a couple of questions here I'm going to share. For Elham, it says, my manager interrupts me all the time. How can I tell him that I need quiet time to work?
That's an interesting one. I think that in a context where maybe a manager is maybe over monitoring a little bit, maybe the employee should be very honest with their manager and just say, that I'm going to devote, like 4 hours today to just writing something or developing this report. Can we meet after? So in other words, just communicate to your manager that you need, a certain amount of time without interruption. I think it's also not bad sometimes to put it on your schedule, just saying working on a report, on, chapter 2, chapter 3, whatever you're working on, so that it's, clear that you're busy working at that time. I think that an employee should also take charge, and in cases where the manager is not organized enough to, ask for maybe weekly feedback, maybe the employee should set up the time and say, how about we meet beginning of the week and end of the week to discuss some of these things. So I hope those help.
Yeah, that's great. A great question and great response. Here's another one for you. What's different from COVID-19 teleworking and, quote, regular teleworking? Is what we're doing now a fair assessment for the suitability of teleworking when we're in a more regular situation?
Yes. Well, let's face it, we're in this situation. So whether or not it's fair, I think, kind of goes out the door. I think what we should do is try to make the best of it and, really improve. The third session, which we're doing in this webinar series, will focus quite a bit on policy development, guidelines, what are some parameters that should be clear so that this is not a loose arrangement. Now, I think the difference right now is that employees don't have control over a lot of the distractions that are in the home. In a normal telework type of a situation, it's really required. And actually a friend of mine said to me the other day, if anyone had any doubt as to whether or not telework could replace childcare, I think they've all gotten their answer now, because they have found out that it's impossible to be doing both. And so, is it a fair time to do this? Maybe not, it's not a perfect time, but at least it's getting a lot of organizations to try it when, normally they would have said we'll do it in a year or we'll do it in 6 months. So it's kind of forcing everyone's feet to the fire.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I think it's also, it's been a great opportunity for people to find out where the missing bubbles are when they're thinking about their continuity of operations planning. So,
yes.
So here's another one for Bernie. What are some basic things you can check if you're working from home and having trouble with your home internet or network connection?
Well, certainly, I think we've all had that from time to time, and it's in addition to basic troubleshooting, when you get to a point you really don't know what's going on. The service providers for internet service, the cable companies, et cetera, have really good online audio tools when you dial in and ask for help. They've really automated pretty much anything that can happen. And when you dial in, if they were to provide staff to do all this, all our bills would go up tremendously. But they've gotten this to the point where, they'll give you, okay, unplug this connector here, wait 5 minutes, then come back on and, tell us what happens. And most of them are voice activated or touch tone activated, but even the voice activated ones have been very good. They can be very helpful. There are a lot of, if you do some searches for some YouTube videos and Google searches, the wonderful thing is that I don't think any of us can do anything with any of these computers, software tools, or internet services that hasn't happened to somebody else already. And you usually find, if you can concisely describe what it is, a quick search will find a solution. It's also a great idea if you're in an organization that's larger than one person to form a little tech support group if you don't have a help desk or a tech support group to call upon within your employer's organization and share ideas and share problems, because if it's 5 or 50 or 500 people, you're all going to run into the same problems from time to time, and you can save yourself a lot of time. So if you can have a little tech support group to share information, that you can put something out in a group email and get solutions, you'll find that can work pretty well.
Great, thank you so much, Bernie. Okay, I have one more for you, Elham. Sorry, I've got 2 more. One for Elham here. My employee is not meeting her deliverables. What should I do?
I think that as a manager, we've got to be strong managers. And that's something that sometimes in the context of the office, you see someone and you can point out maybe what's not working. But, managers do become more organized when people are teleworking, because they have to have a good idea of what's getting done. So if the employee is not meeting their deliverables, talk with them immediately, find out what's not, what's going on, find out if there are any issues, try to help them resolve it, and make sure that you're coaching them and having those conversations, because if you neglect it, it's not going to go away. So I would say it really goes back to, to giving them help and seeing if, their problems are technology related, if they're skill related, and get them the right training.
Great, thank you. So while there are so many working from home right now due to COVID-19, what jobs are actually really ideal for teleworking away from the crisis situation?
Okay. I think, again, and Bernie, please feel free to also chime in, that we have to be really careful, because, we don't want to create a digital divide here. And, about 30 to 40% of employees have jobs that are information-based and, lend themselves to teleworking. So let's not forget that there's, a whole nother universe out there that, may not be suitable for teleworking, especially on a full-time basis. So, obviously jobs that require, research, writing, database analysis, developing reports, all these jobs, and these are components of many jobs. So it's not so much the particular job, but if you can break the functions down so that you can have an idea of what can be done remotely. So I think as organizations, what we do want to do is also make sure that we have solutions for employees later on that may not be ideal for teleworking, or who may have jobs that do not lend themselves to teleworking.
And Elham, Bernie here, I think I'd also offer that, when you think that many of us weren't teleworking, I think about organizations that have had staff, particularly in sales and sales engineering, who have been on the road since the beginning of time, and they were the pioneers on a lot of these tools, and a lot of the tools that we're using now are things that they've used for some time, and sometimes they can be great to turn to. They've been living out of hotel rooms and living on the road and having conference calls in their cars and video calls in remote locations and doing email and coffee shops for years. And sometimes they can be great to turn to for some of the solutions, because they're the folks with a lot of experience in this area.
Thanks, Bernie. I fully agree with you. They did pave the road for the rest of us.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pop us over to our last slide here. So for those of you who are watching, you can determine which Florida Department of Transportation district you're located in here. Just find where your county is, and then you can see the corresponding provider for the commuter services program in your area. My group is Florida Department of Transportation District 7. We're Pinellas, Hillsborough, Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus. We also work really closely with Commute Connector in the green section to help out in Manatee County. So you can see our contact information there. Any of us would love to work with your business, help you set up a commute alternative program for your employees, either helping you with telework right now or carpool, vanpool, transit programs in the future. Here too are the next 2 sessions that are coming up, Collaborative Technologies for Telework next week, and then Embracing Cultural Change to support teleworking the following Friday. We do still have a couple minutes left here, so if we have any questions, type them in the Q&A. We are going to launch the evaluation. We ask that you please all fill this out. Let us know how we're doing. This really helps as we put these together in the future. It'll help us do better for you next week. So if you could please take just a couple minutes and fill that out. And that's what we've got for today. We can leave this open for a couple more minutes. We've had some nice conversation in the chat box. If anybody else sees somebody they know in the participant list and wants to say hi, take a minute to do that. Thank you all so much for joining us. Look forward to these in the future. We have these 2 others coming up in the next couple of weeks, but recognizing that telework and other sorts of webinars are useful for our commute partners, we'll be looking at what else we can come up with in the future and provide these to you as well. So thank you so much to Christine and Phil for hosting us on their Adobe Connect platform. Thank you to Elham and Bernie for a great presentation. Thank you to Annie Araguello from Commute Connector and Chris Mahoney from Rethink Your Commute for helping us sponsor this. Florida Department of Transportation, who provides funding for all 3 of our programs. If you have a great telework program that can qualify you as a primary benefit for best workplaces for commuters, we'd love to help you get that national designation too. So any of the 3 of us can help you with that as well. So we try to be full service and turnkey, and we hope we can provide you with some great resources in the future. Thank you all for joining us.